Nothing gets me out of bed in the morning than remembering this Italian lady who had a string of restaurants and they were about to go under. I redid all of her marketing and they turned it around in 2 months. Right like you're at a barbecue. Jargon is out unless it's vital for them to understand it. All of marketing has to answer the question, what's in it for me? Because that's all anybody is thinking. If your service, product, whatever, doesn't answer that question quickly, then you're gone.
Does marketing and content creation ever feel hard and time-consuming? What if it didn't have to be that way?
Join Rob Drummond,
Matthew Bliss,
and me, Pete Daly-Dickson, your ideal companions on the journey to a value-first approach to business growth, here on Help Before You Sell. So, Royce, I don't know you very much more than Rob and Matt do. We met at a sort of virtual coffee meet hosted by Pete Reginella a few weeks ago. And just something about how you were showing up and when what you were talking about, and I checked out your LinkedIn profile. But just for the sake of us as well as the listener, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, why you are, how you are?
Yeah, I actually have been a broadcaster. I've been on the radio for over 30 years. And I did mainly morning shows on the radio. And one thing I discovered, the hard part is not getting up at 3:30 in the morning. It's being funny at 5 in the morning. That's the hard part of morning radio. But my day was pretty much over by 11 a.m. And after a quick nap, of course, I realized I had, half a day left. And that's how I got into marketing and started like a lot of people do. Just a couple way back then, it was just books. Right? We didn't have webinars and things like that back then. So, one course led to another and I became a copywriter. I started with direct mail and slowly morphed into all kinds of things. I've written for 17 unique industries so far. And so I've done some crazy things. And for the past 15 plus years, I've been a marketing coach. And dealing with so many businesses and their problems, I've kind of really morphed into a marketing strategist more than anything. I like to help people kind of point them in the right direction in the first place. Then I can help them with the actual tactics. So that's kind of where I am.
Everyone skips a strategy and goes straight to tactics. That's been my experience anyway. I mean, I just want to dig down on that. Do people come to you asking about tactics and then you say, well, let's push pause and talk about a strategy, or do they come to you asking for a strategy?
It really depends because, my tagline is I help small businesses get more customers, pay them more money more often. And, it really depends. Obviously, every business is like humans. They're unique. So my favorite, and it happens hundreds of times, is you get a call from someone and they say, I need to run Facebook ads. And, I stop them and say, well, why? Well, Bob's tire store down the street runs them and he does great, and this is some kind of I've written for people that make commercial dumpsters. I've written for, I now write for a lot of jewelers, which I never expected, kind of fell into that through referrals. And I love jewelers, but they're not the funniest people in the world. And being from radio, I like to be on the edge more. I much more be creative. So, although we have done some very creative things with jewelers as well, including a zombie party. So,
And are you still on the radio, Royce?
No, there's very few humans left on the radio, Peter. It's almost all automated these days. I'm not sure how it is at the BBC, but definitely here we get, for instance, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we got our traffic reports, as in when you're driving, from Cincinnati. So some guy in Cincinnati is reading the traffic report. Say if there's a crash on the I-10 freeway at whatever, and this guy's probably never been to Arizona. And then he flips a switch and does traffic for Cleveland, because it only takes one person. And so many people, it's just about money now. It's really, it's become so corporate. So I do a lot of podcasts, and I have done a couple of fill-ins for radio folks. And once you learn it, especially after a few decades, you kind of know what you're doing. You know what I mean? So it's it's like riding a bike.
I bet you got some stories though from your time at morning radio and the kind of people that you met and you interviewed.
Amazing stories. Yes.
Any standout moments?
I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years. I've done a lot of incredible stunts. My favorite would probably be a flight with the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. So that's the Navy demonstration team. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with those. They're the ones that fly in formation 3 feet apart from each other and things like that. So
yeah, we have the red arrows here in the UK.
It's interesting because when the Blue Angels go to a market, they pick one person from television, one from newspaper, and one from radio just to get the publicity. So I was chosen on the radio side. And I'm also a pilot myself, so it was extra exciting. And I was also the first one they took up, and that's awesome because the pilot had never been. This was in Tucson, Arizona. Had never been to Tucson before, so he had to fly around for a while just to get used to the actual topography. I mean, make sure he wasn't going to hit any mountains or anything. So my ride lasted probably 20 minutes longer than everybody else's because the pilot was trying to figure it out. But yeah, he let me fly. I did rolls. I did all kinds of crazy things. So that was awesome. But I broadcast the Olympics from Norway. I spent a total of 3 weeks in Jamaica on the radio station Dime for the Jamaican, Visitors Bureau. So yeah, there's a lot. There are perks.
What was the transition point from that life to the life of helping small business owners?
Well, it was, they ran, parallel, really. I could do that in the afternoon. And while I was still doing the radio thing, because obviously, especially copywriting, occasionally, as you know, some folks would like their things by Thursday, which I'm happy to do for an extra $10,000, or some amazing amount that they'll never agree to. Although I have spent several late nights, pumping stuff out, but I usually have some leeway, and if you're smart, you pad that into your proposal.
The thing that comes to my mind is trying to find out if there was anything specific that brought you to copywriting, though. Like it's very easy to perhaps luxuriate by the pool or take up a hobby.
Right, absolutely. I was lost, even though I had a radio career, but I realized I had so much time left in the day, and I didn't have kids at that point, so it was my life was pretty much open. And I remember seeing an ad, and I have no idea if it still exists, but a guy named Jeff Paul wrote a book called, and it was just probably, I don't know, 20 pages, How to Make Money in Your Underwear. And I thought, wow, this is for me, man, because, when you have to be so creative on the radio, if you're good anyway. And, the awesome part about it is, or I don't know, frightening part about it is you're live, right? We didn't tape anything. It had to be live. The downside of that too, even if it was incredible, it's gone. It's gone forever the second you say it. So, I knew I wanted something in the creative realm anyway. So that's what I thought, gosh, I could write ads because I've at that point, a lot of, disc jockeys, air talent personality, whatever you'd like to, title yourself, you do a lot of cold reads. You read commercials for clients on the air, and either that live or tape them. That's part of your duties. Is you get off the air and you record 2 or 3 commercials. And so I got that in my brain about how what, and I could tell instantly after a while what's going to work and what's not, just by, especially on the air. And back then we had a much more attention than we do now, a much more captive audience. So, but you could still tell what was a good hook or not, or would this keep their attention? So that kind of led me, I think, more in the marketing direction, because I could see, this guy, okay, they'll take your money, but I can tell you right now, this is not going to work. Your first annual tire sale is not going to make people drive in. Sorry.
You got to a point. You got to a point where you're reading the commercial thing. I could do better than that. So you started writing them yourself.
Oh, absolutely. So, and that did happen with a couple of clients. Well, they became clients after I was doing their live reads, and I would add things that they had never thought of. And all of a sudden, who's that guy that read my commercial on the air? Oh, that's Royce. Well, check him out. I'd like to talk to him. And then next thing you know, I'm getting a few extra dollars here. Or the other awesome part, which they really frown on these days too, was, you'd get a lot of spiffs. If a client liked you, they would give you some of their product. I knew several people who, magically got swimming pools and their house furnished and, all kinds of that were totally illegal. But, hey, it worked for him. But that was for him reading their commercials. That was his price. So I guess technically it's not illegal because they were both agreeing to it, but
it was frowned upon. Yeah. Well, so Royce, the title of this podcast is Help Before You Sell. When I got in touch with you after meeting you at Pete Reginella's coffee meet, what did you take that to mean? And how did it resonate with you? And why did you accept the invitation to come on the show?
It is really, it forms my entire soul, whatever, for lack of a better word, when it comes to helping clients. Nothing, let me digress for just a moment. Nothing gets me out of bed in the morning than remembering a story from this Italian lady who had a string of restaurants in Alabama, of all places, Italian restaurants in the deep South. And they were about to go under, and the restaurants had been in the family for generations. And I redid all of her marketing, including her menus and things like that. And they turned it around in 2 months. And she called me crying, literally crying on the phone. And she had a thick Italian accent. And it was, I can't do accents, but, Royce, is this, hello? Yeah. Yes, it's Mia. Oh, hi, Mia. And she just wanted to thank me for saving a restaurant. So that still, and that was 15 years ago, but it still gets me out of bed in the morning because I don't look to sell. My concept is I'm here to help people buy. And whatever that is, if I can't help them, I'll tell them right up front. And I found that builds trust faster than anything you can do about talking about your methods or your techniques or your slant. I'll explain to them all the different ways they can attack whatever challenge they're having, and how much it's going to cost. Sure, absolutely, you can start a YouTube channel. And then I explain to them how many YouTube channels there are and how long they last and how much fun it is I'm sure you guys are living it right now, how much fun it is to get guests and make sure they show up. And you never know. Marketing, I think, is like a casino. only you have better odds. But no one can ever predict the outcome. You just can't quantify it. And, one of my favorite Brits of all time, and I'm sure you guys are really familiar with him, is Rory Sutherland. And I love Rory's stuff because it's more psychology than it is just marketing tactics. But that's who we're talking to. We're talking to people. And I just heard a phrase, who's a semi friend, but a longtime marketer. I don't know if you guys are aware of Alex Catoni. Definitely worth checking out. She specializes mainly in teaching copywriters, and she's got a ton of copywriting courses. But she had a great term she threw out, and it's distrust is the new default. And I think that's the area we're living in today. People are just so skeptical about anything. You have to be so careful about, telling them what, they can expect, or, obviously you guys know, just promising the sky. It's not ethical. And once again, there's no real way you can quantify it on a spreadsheet. You don't know who's going to buy. The thing, I did a promotion once that I spent 2 weeks on, and we launched it, and it was crickets. I think we had like 2 people actually click the email. Everybody was freaking out because we'd spent so much money and I spent so much time, and I was dead sure this thing was going to work. And everybody's freaking out. So I rewrote the entire promo in 2 hours, and it blew up. We made a 437% profit on that. And that took me 2 hours. So you just never know.
So it was the right audience, just the wrong approach.
Yeah. Good luck. We have, speaking of YouTube, I don't know if it ever hit the UK, but there was a guy on the skateboard riding down a hill, drinking Ocean Spray cranberry juice. And have you seen that one? And it's from a couple of years ago now. And Ocean Spray exploded. And, all he had was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac in the background. And it was him riding down a hill on a skateboard with a big jug of Ocean Spray. And they blew up. And who knows? And the thing got, I don't know how many millions of views. So you just, it's like, okay, you're going to tell me that finance was okay with putting that on the board and saying, yeah, what we should do? We should get a guy on a skateboard. And.
It's a really interesting that you brought up the skeptical aspect, because you hear it all the time these days. Authenticity is what people are looking for in content. And the YouTuber's refrain will be, the video that took me an hour to put together will do better than the one that took me 20 hours to put together, or, whatever. So do you find that you've had to pivot your copywriting into, dare we say, a more authentic style? Like
Yes,
what you just said about the 2-hour promo that did better than the one that took probably a bit longer than that?
absolutely. I think people want real now, and that's why you'll find, look at TikTok, right? Some guy is, I found these days, people like, for some reason, you doing something else on video. So you're working on your car and just happen to, turn your head and talk about investing in gold. It's just strange things like that. But in copy, don't be afraid to use words or on video or whatever your medium is that are not, let's say, proper. Right. So you can start sentences with and. I always tell people, write like you're at a barbecue, right? Don't skip all jargon is out unless it's vital for them to understand, and then explain it. So those people that don't understand it, that's what he's talking about. If you have to use jargon, but if you're just talking back and forth, and I am a big proponent especially for podcasters, is getting used to yourself, getting used to how you speak and look. So I'm always telling people to record themselves, even if you're just doing dishes or making a grocery list. Get used to how you speak. Best is go have lunch with a friend and pitch them on whatever that idea you have is, even if it's for a client. Explain to them how you're thinking about explaining this as a promo piece, or an ad, and see if they get it. And more importantly, listen back to the words you're using, and those that resonate, that will be the secret sauce to success, because people want real. Once again, distrust is everywhere now.
Yeah, we did an episode on empathy a while back, and that being the gist of really going and speaking to people in the market, not spending too long creating so-called avatars and imagining people up, and really listening and paying attention to the language that they're using and the things that they're saying.
Yes. And it brings up another thing, Rob, is that I deal with so many businesses. When I ask them, the number one question I sit down and ask is, who is this for? And the amount of people that have no idea who buys from them, have no idea who their ideal customer is flabbergasting to me. But once you get that, a little trick I use, even if you don't know the actual people, it really doesn't matter, is I put a photo of that person right above my computer so I can write to that persona and, understand. And you'd be amazed at how many businesses assume that these are college educated people that are their best buyers who, drive Audis or whatever. And it turns out they're guys in gym shorts that like to surf. So, it's obviously a totally different angle you want to come from. And it works, almost every time. And the fun part of marketing is it changes every day. Isn't that great?
Do you ever reading age grade your writing just to see what age ranges it would be readable for in a school?
Sure. I never write. Well, fifth grade is the top for me. I will never write anything, even if it's for doctors, lawyers, whatever. It's fifth grade level or below. They did this was back in the 2016 election here in the US. And they did an analysis of the grade levels of Hillary Clinton, who was running against Donald Trump. And they discovered she was speaking in her speeches, like campaign speeches, at a high school level. Trump was speaking at a third grade level. That's the kind of, we always think, oh gosh, people want simple. And if you require anyone to work at reading or listening to what you're pitching, they're not going to do it. They're gone. They're going to turn it off. There's too many choices. So keep it as simple as you possibly can. And here's a trick all marketers forget is we're the only ones that see 100% of our marketing, right? We all know about, and they keep arguing over how many impressions, right? You have to have before your message gets through. So we're dealing with so much noise now, and we get so bored with our message. Oh man, that's been going on for a month and a half. I got to change this. When whatever the percentage is, 60% of the people are hearing it or seeing it for the first time. Yeah. So, that's an important thing to remember too.
Getting a flashback to when we first set up the Activate Your Podcast website piece. And I think the headline we used was something like generate a consistent flow of leads. And Izzy got in touch with you and said, is that how you say it to someone in the pub?
Yeah, exactly.
So we changed it to something like, what if marketing was as easy as speaking to an old friend?
I love the bar analogy too, but a lot of people, that's why I kind of switch it. It depends on who I'm talking to, obviously, but yeah, barbecue is much more safe. But yeah, absolutely. Talk at the pub, at the bar.
Been some tremendous advice that you've already dropped on this podcast. And when you were talking about recording yourself, I thought Royce is talking our language, because we're all about conversation, record conversations, and that's the easiest way to, if you want to create written material in your business, whether it be a blog post or emails, the best way to do that is to record yourself first and then repurpose that recording. So it's great. It's great to hear that we're not the only people preaching that message.
No, believe me, my note taker fills up almost every day. Here's a little trick too, and I'm sure you guys have fallen into this. Make sure you give it some context when you're leaving yourself a voice note or recording something you want to write down later or download. Put some context in there, because I've found I'll find notes for myself and I'll have no idea what parakeet and bikini means. A day later, I'm like, parakeet and bikini. Why did I? Because I didn't put any context. I was just like, this is great. I have to record this now.
Pete, I dread to think how many voice notes you leave for yourself.
Here's another pit, and this is great if you have house guests too, because they'll really wonder about this. I actually have a mini whiteboard in my shower. And because how many of us have had thoughts in the shower and no way to, you can't bring I guess you probably could bring your phone in there, but so I keep a little mini whiteboard in my shower. And of course, house guests come over and there's, why is there a whiteboard in your shower? Are you keeping score?
Why does it say parakeets and bikinis on it?
I mean,
I keep a notepad by my bed as well for similar reasons, and it's usually writing in the dark at 4 a.m.
Yeah, but once again, Rob, put some context next to it so you don't wake up and go, what is boulder and whatever, and spatula mean,
Well, one of the things that we do on this podcast, Royce, is we have explored and we are exploring all the different ways that business owners can help their clients before they sell to them. It's like putting one guest we had on the show talked about, it's putting information in front of the sale. And the more information and the more high quality information you put in front of the sale to your potential clients, the less selling actually you have to do, because they're building up the trust, they're building up the knowledge, the confidence that you're able to deliver. Now, obviously, one of the ways that people can help their clients before they sell is with a podcast. It's one of the reasons that we do this. And there was one aspect of your background and your skill set and your experience that we wanted to collectively tap into you on behalf of our listener. And that is your skill and experience of interviewing people. It's very easy to think, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to interview guests and sort of get out nuggets of wisdom for my potential clients to help them before I sell to them. But you and I both know that there's a lot of difference between just having a chat with someone down the bar and or at a barbecue, and actually conducting or having interviewing them in a way that is really going to add value to the listener. So can we kind of perhaps pivot the conversation a little bit to that and sort of draw on your experience, your kind of horror stories or your learnings from how do you best conduct an interview for a podcast?
Let's go down two different tracks for interviewing skills. And but is it okay if I mention my website here?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. If you just go to voiceofroyce.com, it's just voiceofroyce.com. Right now, it's still free. I wrote a 40-plus page ebook so people can learn interviewing skills from my 30-plus years on the radio, because I've interviewed hundreds of people, and not just celebrities, but Guinness World Record holders and just strange people in general. So there's a lot of tidbits in there, and it's an easy read. It's no fluff. It's all things that have worked for me. So that will help anybody, if podcaster, event hosts, sales presentations.
Can you share like one or two trailers?
Sure, absolutely. It's everything from listening skills, which I think is the number one thing that I see a lot of people, probably number 7 really, but it's people don't listen, especially in podcasts. They're so worried about getting to question 7 right after a guest has said something incredible that listeners want to hear. They just move on and skip over it because they're so worried about context, especially these days when we can edit it. I didn't have, it was live for me. But if you can you have to get out of your mindset, and all of these do take a lot of practice. The reason I sound somewhat natural at this is because I have the reps in. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Tony Robbins, and it's repetition is the mother of skill. The more you do something, obviously, the better you'll be at it. And I've been on the air for so long in so many different situations, from news to country music to, obviously rock and roll and everything in between. You get the reps in, you get better at it. You don't have a choice. But number one is listen as a listener. So if you're listening to, it's tough to do on a podcast. You just close your eyes and keep your hearing through your headphones and listen, just like a listener would on the radio. And remember that especially podcasts are almost always a solitary experience. You're talking to one person. So lose the whole, hey, everybody, and welcome to the show, audience. That's not the mindset. You're talking to Susie, who's doing the dishes or yelling at the kids or whatever, and she's got you in her ear. That's usually what's happening. So that is really important.
I don't think we've ever got to question 7 with any guests so far.
Yeah, well, good.
It's funny. I'm smiling while you're saying that, Rob, because I co-host another podcast called Built by Love with a very dear friend, Daniel Bushes. And he started, and he still does. And the guests actually really appreciate it. Daniel does amazing research on the guests, and he sends them, a good A4 sheet of questions just to kind of give the guests confidence, if you like, that, this is the kind of direction we're going. But yeah, I don't think we've ever even got past question 2 because I'm the exact opposite. But sometimes it is good. I mean, I guess what you're saying is don't be not prepared, but be prepared to let your preparation go.
Right. And that comes with a great outline, which is also in my ebook, by the way. So cover the topics you want to, for sure, and something that's going to be a winner for the audience. And make sure you ask the guest if there's anything they have to cover or want to. I mean, I had so many celebrities on that had to promote a film or a new record coming out or whatever. And that was part of their job. That's why they agreed to the interview in the first place, right? So let them roll with that. Let them get that out. But at the same time, if somebody's off on a tangent, let them go if it's interesting. I also include a couple of techniques to get people to shut up and also to get people to open up, because I've had both sides of that coin.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about both sides of that coin, so you've kind of anticipated the question. I mean, do you have some tips on both sides of that?
Absolutely. If you want to get people to open up, you want to find something maybe not on that topic that they're worried about, they're concerned about. Let's say it's somebody from a lawyer's office a barrister's office. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So, and they want to be very careful about what they say. But let me back up a little here. Number one is do research. Do as much research on a guest as you possibly can, right? Check out their LinkedIn file. If they have a Facebook page, check that out. For me, obviously, it was easier with celebrities because I could dig into, their IMDb account or something like that. But even a normal person usually has some other form of social media besides. Don't ever rely on a press release or whatever release they gave you about explaining who they are, because there's a lot more to them. And if you want to get them to open up, start talking about their hobby as a beekeeper or whatever it is, and they'll immediately open up and relax. On the other side, if you'd like them to, get back on track, I would, without sounding rude, is using phrases like, oh, before I forget, what about the time you did this? Or, oh, that reminds me, I wanted to ask you about, and they'll be forced in their brains to answer the new question. Or there's nothing wrong with saying, if you're confused, then the listener is too. So just stop and go, I didn't really get that. Can you expand on that? Or can you explain that a little more? I don't get what that means. What does a beekeeper do exactly?
Really interesting you bring that up, Royce, because I think people who are inexperienced at having conversations or interviews, that are recorded, are afraid of being stupid or asking a stupid question. But I think what you said there is that, if you're confused about what your guest has said, then the chances are that the listener of that podcast episode is also going to be confused. And I come at conversations with the guests on the podcast as much, if not more, from the position of the listener of the episode than I am from me. So I'm almost like the proxy for the listener. Like what question would the listener ask at this stage? And I'm almost observing the conversation between my guest and the listener of the podcast episode, and that kind of helps me keep focused on the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity you should have that right above. I have curiosity right above my monitor, along with something that I think everyone appreciates, just in case you get into imposter syndrome, or maybe you're afraid to try something new. I have a big sign right above my monitor that says, "Hey, you screwed up way bigger things than this." And it reminds me that, no one, especially like when we're on the air, right? Nobody's going to die here, man. If the podcast doesn't, nobody's dying here. But before I forget, see how I use that? And you guys did this, whether you realized it or not, if it was just happenstance. People are not used to this. They're barely used to Zoom meetings half the time, right? And most of them are required, or some part of business they have to conduct with the team or whatever. So it's not natural to people. So what I always do is I start recording first, and just like you guys did. So all of a sudden we're having a quick chat, and it just naturally flows into it. I've seen so many podcasters announce, right? Okay, we're about to go live, or we're starting the recorder now. And that's when everybody tenses up. It's just like getting introduced on stage or something. Okay, here he is. That's when the butterflies are the highest. So if you can just ease people into it and cut out the intro later.
Or keep it in, because sometimes we find it's that stuff that in that little bit of banter at the beginning, because it is so relaxed, it just stays in. But you can make that decision afterwards.
I think as well with guests, we're always trying to get to the conversation that they will never have had before, especially if you've got a guest that is used to doing a lot of podcast conversations. So we don't just want to repeat the same version of what already exists.
And that's where the research comes in, especially with celebrities, because most of them are on a press junket, right? So they're going from, even though you have them for 10 minutes, yeah, they just finished 5 other TV stations and radio stations in a row. They just sit them down and they talk to, all these stations for hours. And so if I know something that I know they've never been asked before, all of a sudden I'm a god in their life because they've just spent hours answering the same 5 questions. So if I find something weird about their hobbies, about their wives, about their kids, something that nobody knew about them, then that's gold too. And it works the same for clients. If I dig into a client, I will research a client. I will check their website. I'll check their past advertising. I'll, obviously check the easy ones, LinkedIn profiles and things like that. If they have a podcast, I'll listen to it. I listen to yours. So, I kind of like, oh, okay, I know these guys are pretty laid back, so I don't have to worry about rapid fire here. So
I've got a question which I stumbled upon by accident, but I've used a couple of times since. Again, on the Built by Love podcast, we had James Lawrence on, whose his nickname is the Iron Cowboy. I don't know if you've come across him. He's had a couple of documentaries on Netflix. He did 50 Ironman triathlons in all 50 states in 50 consecutive days. So 50, 50, 50. Just an incredible human being. And obviously he's had a Netflix documentary about it. So it's a very well-known story, and he speaks from the stage in front of, thousands of people. And just going back to what Rob said there about having the conversation with people that they've not had before, I just found a question coming out of my mouth is like, James, okay, so you're 50, 50, 50 is well documented. You talked about it a lot, but what's a question that no one has asked you about that experience? And it made him pause. And you just know that he's not used to pausing when he talks about 50, 50, 50 because he does it so much. But it made him pause, and he reflected. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the answer was, but we got something out of James, which no other podcast interview I got. And again, I guess it comes back to what you were saying, Royce, about being curious. Be really genuinely curious about this human that you're in conversation with.
Absolutely. And it's going deep, and they appreciate that on a human level, that you took the time, because they've been through all these interviews where somebody just read the book jacket, right? Or saw the movie trailer, or they don't really know what happened. If it's a movie, ask them about, mess ups on set or practical jokes on set, things like that. Or if it's a business, ask them, what gets you excited? What are you excited about now? And I know the podcasts I saw with you guys, you were talking about networking, right? And that's one of my favorite icebreakers too. Instead of what do you do, ask them, hey, what are you excited about right now?
And
And
that's a great question.
That tends to open people up too, because they want to hear, okay, what's next? They're humans, they're people, everybody, business wise and celebrity wise. So, they have the same foibles. What scares you? Better, what scares the crap out of you?
So what are you excited about at the moment, Royce? What's going on for you?
Gosh, I have people laugh at me now because one of my favorite phrases is it's on my list, and almost everything is on my list right now because I'm I'm rebuilding a website. I'm building a Facebook page for Voice of Royce. Don't go there. There's nothing there right now. Of course, there may be but it's on the list. So, and building my email list now because I want to move this into, because the ebook itself is called How to Keep an Audience, Interviewing Skills from a 30-Year Radio Pro. And I'm kind of moving that towards more of a course so I can help podcasters because there's tons of info about podcast tech and, how to promote it and market it. And I can help a little with that, but that's not my goal. My goal is to help people become better podcaster and be engaging.
It sounds like email would be one of the ways for you to help before you sell.
Email is even today is so underrated because, yes, I know I can't even remember the stat, but it's something like, I think we get close to 1 billion a day now worldwide. So, everybody's, it's too noisy. Nobody reads that. You don't care how many people you have on your list. You just want the right people on your list. And once you get that, then they fall in love with you. And I like my emails, which just started, a month and a half ago. I can say anything in my emails, right? You can't say it on LinkedIn, but you can certainly say it in your emails. So I give bare bones advice, things that I've screwed up and I've learned from, and new things, like, you should try. Like I just posted on LinkedIn about using, when we're talking about crutches, the words you use over and over again, especially as a podcaster or a radio guy. They're called crutches because you don't even realize you're using it. It's your favorite phrase. The high level version of that, besides just recording yourself and listening back to it, so you get used to yourself and your voice, so you're not freaked out. When when you put on headphones, obviously you're hearing that. That's how radio guys get. We call it affectation. You hear them the first time you've heard your own voice recorded, right? You're like, wow, I don't sound like that. Well, it's the same thing with headphones, but you're hearing it live. So radio guys tend to, they think, wow, that sounds pretty good. Wow. Pretty soon they get lower, right? It's, hey, that sounds even better. Wow, that sounds awesome. And pretty soon you're talking like this because it sounds great. And that's what we call puking in the business. So that's what, because hi there, how are you? Oh, there.
Is that why you talk the way you do, Peace?
I've got 2 words to say to you, Rob, and one of them's fuck.
But that's a natural thing. But if you take that conversation, you're having coffee with someone, tell them up front, look, I'm going to pitch you this idea and I'm going to record it. Is that okay? It should only take a couple of minutes. They're friends. They're going to say, yeah, no problem. I don't care. So record that conversation and then import it into a word cloud generator. You just put whatever it is in there and it'll show the most used word larger. It'll make it stick out or change it to red instead of blue, whatever. So you can see this cloud of words. And once you dump that into a word cloud generator, you'll be instantly able to visualize exactly what your crutches are. And I found it really, really helpful. I had almost every show of mine was taped, obviously, probably mostly for legal reasons. But, occasionally the program director sits down and goes over an air check with you so they can critique how your show is. So they're picking out your crutches and they're telling you, giving you feedback on what's working and what isn't. And it could be simple phrases. I used to say, that's crazy all the time. And it seems innocuous, but if you say it, twice an hour, then
it's really, really annoying. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great tip about the word cloud. Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I have that insane power of figuring out what people's go-to word is too often. It's very annoying.
And we don't even realize we're doing it, but it can be annoying to a listener. And it's also a great way when dealing with clients. I like to listen very carefully to how they phrase words and not just their tonality, but also their pace, their cadence. Are they a fast talker? Are they a slow talker? Is this a used car salesman or a monk? You know what I mean? And that being able to mirror that energy really helps building trust. But getting back to helping people, number one, I want to know where they're at and where they want to go. What are you hoping for out of this? Tell me what's a win for you? What does that look like? Because it's going to be entirely different for some people. They'll want, I want to increase my revenue by $100,000 in the next 3 months. Okay, got that. Another person says, I want more women coming in my store. You need to ask, okay, how can I help you? What do you need? That's right up there with who's this for.
There's just a slight tangent. There's a famous interviewer in the UK. He's not on television anymore. Michael Parkinson. I don't know if he ever went across to the US. Do you know Michael Parkinson?
Yes.
There's a famous clip of him interviewing or attempting to interview Goldie Hawn one time, and she was monosyllabic. I mean, it's just if you ever want to feel incredibly like watching The Office, it's like incredibly cringy. But have you ever had a guest like that like
absolutely
almost just does not want to be there?
Blood from Stone comes to mind.
Yes, and once again, it's getting them back to something they enjoy, which gets back to research. So yes, let them talk, even if in your mind and they have no idea what you're going to cut out, right? So, let them go on about beekeeping or gardening or, whatever, feng shui, and get them excited, and you'll find they'll drop that. They'll drop. A lot of it is fear or just nervousness. They don't want to screw up. So they figure, or they think it's like a deposition in court, right? They just they don't want to be, responsible for anything they say. So once again, if you get them talking about something they love or hate, it works the other way too. It's funny these days in the US, you want to fire up any room, just walk in and say Trump, and you're set because you're going to split the room. So, which I never do, but that gives you an idea of immediate emotion. So I always like to go with something they're passionate about, but if it's a news type interview or informational, talk about something they're totally against, and that will get them to open up as well.
I'd like to lean just a little bit closer to dystopias, and thank you, Pete, for providing me a bit of a segue. A couple of months ago, the Michael Parkinson has died, unfortunately, so his show had ceased a little bit before that. But more recently, the estate of Parkinson, who controlled his voice and his appearance and all those things for television, have recently approved the ability to use his voice and an AI-trained model to create questions and respond to guests for potential future recordings. Now, this is a podcast style or podcast interviewer who couldn't possibly benefit from the things that you would provide for new interviewers onto the scene. But it kind of brings us, just close enough to AI to not, turn the next hour into a discussion about AI and copywriting. So with that kind of stuff coming up, how does that make you feel about where you are and what the landscape for interviewers, I guess, for the next few years could be?
Yeah, I think, we're on the cusp of AI is getting so good, so fast that we're not going to notice the way things are in, I bet, a year and a half. That's how quickly it's moving. I knew a lot. Well, a quick side story. I was working in Salt Lake City, Utah. We had 9 radio stations in the same building. And I happened to go in on a Saturday because I had to cut a promo that started on Monday. So I went in, this is probably 10 a.m. Saturday morning, cut the promo, decided to, go get a soda out of our cafeteria. This is a huge building. There's 9 stations in there. And I'm walking back and all the studios were in one section. And I realized I was the only human in that entire building. And that was 5 years ago. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, man, they're not going to need us very long at all. And sure enough, as I mentioned about, the traffic guys doing reports for 19 different cities, that's where we're headed. Once you look how good, text to voice is now. So, how many people have we seen on all the different channels that aren't real? If somebody's typing it in and which is fine, but we're also entering an age of real, which I think is a good thing for marketers because real people are going to come back. I think we're on to a new era where people they want to see you screw up. They want you, working, vacuuming while you're talking or whatever. They want to relate, and that's what's going to matter more because the more AI takes over, there are going to be less jobs, but the only thing that we can do is creativity, and that's something the bots haven't quite yet figured out. I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually, ChatGPT put out a little notice. It's been a few months ago now. They said they're actually going to run out of content to put up by 2028. So in other words, they've already read the internet at this point, and they're just relying on new content now to steal or whatever word you'd like to use,
No, still's probably pretty accurate.
So, to keep training it because it's already there. It's already read everything written by humans. So, that's kind of scary, but at the same time, for real creativity, I think, we're in a good place, assuming, once again, you're there to help. As I mentioned, every business is as unique as the owner or owners, and everyone wants a different outcome. Somebody may want to sell their business in 5 years. Another may want to leave it to their grandchildren. Totally different dynamic you're dealing with. So that's something, even though you'll be able to put in a few stats and ask ChatGPT or any LLM, okay, I need a business plan for the next 5 years and please write advertising for it. That's where a lot of people are going to go. So I think with the whole market changing, the whole era, the whole, world changing so quickly, as far as entertainment and information goes, they have no idea what's going to happen in a year.
Just going back to your email. So for instance, if you're telling your personal stories to your email list, that's probably not going to be something that's going to go to ChatGPT anytime soon, I'd have thought.
Exactly. That's why I always start an email with a story, and usually in the middle of a story. That's another copywriting trick, right? Don't start with, back in 1963, I went a fishing trip with my dad in, whatever, pick your favorite island. But, no, you start with, that's when I saw the blood coming from my hand.
You think about Die Hard or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, no, the guy just accidentally cut himself with a hook during the fishing trip. But if you see that's when the blood started coming from my hand, you're going to stop and kind of figure why that is, right? And even though it goes back to the fishing trip, which goes back to dad, which goes back to his starting the business back in 1961, you understand? So it's a slippery slope you want to build. That's the secret of copywriting, moving them down a slippery slope. But it's getting better. As you guys know, if it doesn't know, it just makes it up. So it's like, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I've never been to Paris. It's like, why are you telling me my trip to Paris? So yes,
I actually, I had it analyze the transcript for an episode once, and it completely invented the entire podcast episode. And I was like, hang on, have you read the transcript? And he's like, oh, sorry. Let's try that again.
I love the way it apologizes to you as well, and then does it again.
It's definitely more deferential these days. Yeah.
Or they'll change, one sentence or 10 words, and it's like, nope.
Right. So I've made a couple of notes of things that have come up for me from this conversation, of things I think the world needs. One is for marketers to get to the truth and not the sale. Another is that I think we need better conversations, not more of the same conversations. I wonder what you thought the world needs.
We have to look, and this is once again one of my guiding foundations. All of marketing has to answer the question, what's in it for me? Because that's all anybody is thinking. What's in it for me? If your service, product, whatever, doesn't answer that question quickly, then you're gone. We're talking milliseconds on YouTube. We're talking 3 seconds, if you're reading copy. So you have a very short, span to grab their attention. So if you can answer what's in it for them quickly, then you have a chance. So whatever it is, and I'm sure you guys have all run across this, you ask a prospect or a business person, well, who's your product for? Everybody, man, everybody can use this. This is the greatest thing ever. It's like, nah. And finally convince them that no, it's actually for divorced women in their 40s living in the Midwest. That's the kind of granularity we need to get to. And I think that's as I mentioned about email, you just need the right people. Everybody's worried about followers and things like that. And once again, before I forget, AI now, even in email, it used to be a thing in email, right? You couldn't put the word like free in the subject line, or it would immediately go to spam, or special sale, it'll go to spam. They've come a long way, and they're pretty much there now in all the major email service providers. It's reading your email. AI is reading your email. You can put free in the subject line and not get penalized because it knows, no, it's not a scam. It's already read your email before it decides where to send it. So that's the level we're at now, where we're going to be so targeted because they know so much about us as humans, right? How many times have you just been talking about socks and your voice assistant picks it up, even though you've never searched for socks, and all of a sudden on Facebook or wherever you are, Instagram, you're getting ads for socks. Isn't that strange? So, I mean, yes, it's a little, 1984. It's a little George Orwellian there, but I think that's the point. I mean, they have stores now. You have to be, I don't know if they have them in the UK, but there are several stores in the US where it scans you when you walk into the store. And if you're already a customer, it knows exactly your size, what kind of clothes you like, whatever. And it'll say right there as you walk in, hey, Lisa, we've got a sale going on in purses right now, or whatever, either on your phone or on a sign. It'll text you right then and go, hey, good to see you again. Guess what? There's a sale on whatever in, the blank department. So that's where we're headed.
I'm actually up for better service. I'm just not up for controlling people's behavior so much, but we'll work through that.
I've got one eye on the clock, Royce, as much as both ears on the conversation. You've dropped a lot of gold, a lot of great tips and insights in this conversation. But is there any question that the three of us haven't asked you that after we stop recording, we think, on reflection, we think that we should have asked you? What haven't we asked you about your experience of interviewing guests and marketing in general?
Which is another great question to ask a guest, Peter. And is there anything else you'd like to add? So many other people don't do that. I would just say that, yes, things are changing rapidly, and we're not going to have any control over that whatsoever. It's here to stay. AI and the entire, that whole universe is here to stay. So it gets back to reality, and it gets back to helping people. As I said, I don't try to sell. I help people buy. If I'm not the right one for them, I'll point them to someone who is, or another direction that, like, hey, look, you don't need Facebook ads. You need this. Sometimes it's signage or something I know nothing about or get paid for. But, people relate to humans, and that's where we're at right now. The more human you can be, the more real you can be, that will be the advantage. And frequency at this point does not matter. We're in a situation, just like I mentioned about emails, we're in a situation now where you don't have to have a lot of followers to go viral. It used to be big accounts, right? Always got the leg in first. They were always right there at the top because they had so many followers. Not anymore, especially like on X, for instance. X treats, formerly Twitter, they treat every post individually. You could post 10 times in 15 minutes and it would not penalize you. And I think that's where we're headed, because it looks at each post individually. And that's where we're headed with almost all marketing. It's going to look at, okay, what is this about? Who likes it and who can I send it to? And that's why it's so important to understand your ideal customer and do as much research on where they are, what they like, ancillary hobbies, things like that you can tap into. So when you do reach out to them, it makes it real, and that you took the time to understand them. So I think that's the best way to help people, in my opinion.
Yeah, the world doesn't need more marketing. It needs more signal, and signal is a message that helps the right person at the right time.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a great line from I believe, Rory Sutherland, and he talks about, marketing is like talking about astrology, right? If people are into it, they're all into it. But if they're not, they think you're a nutcase. And, I totally agree with that, because it's like I go to get my hair cut. If I want the stylist to talk to me, I tell her I used to be on the radio. If I want her to shut up, I tell her I'm in marketing. And it works every time.
I tell people I work with computers. That does an even better job.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're in good company if we're finishing this episode with a quote from the great Rory Sutherland. So, yeah, just on behalf of the three of us, Royce and our listener, really appreciate you giving up some time your morning to help us tap into your experience, your wisdom, your insights, your knowledge, your skill. So, yeah, thanks for being here. And
can you just repeat your website for the listener?
Absolutely, and it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, helpful. I try to spew out. I can go in a million different directions, but yes. Yeah, if you'd like it, get it while it's free, because I'm going to start charging $37 for this really soon. It's called How to Keep an Audience, Interviewing Skills from a 30-Year Radio Pro. And if you just go to voiceofroyce.com, then you'll be able to just grab it right there. Free for now.
voiceofroyce.com.
Yeah, I know. You want me to go out on like this, guys? I could do that.
No, stop puking, Royce. Stop puking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's Dickson, Drummond, and Bliss. right here.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Help Before You Sell, sponsored by Activate Your Podcast. To activate your podcast and help the people who most need you and your services, head to activateyourpodcast.com/help. If you found this episode helpful, please also leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And remember, help more to sell more. See you next time.